So we're carrying on with our Luke Lent readings. So we're looking at chapters 14 and 15 today. So I'm just going to do a short reflection on some of the things in these two chapters. So to start with, the first thing we have in chapter 14 is Jesus really challenging ideas around hospitality. He does this when he's at somebody's house. He's at a Pharisee's house on the Sabbath, and it comes after he's just healed a man on the Sabbath. And there's this sense of people when they're hosting people and when they're doing hospitality, that there's a sense of people wanting position and power through this. So he really challenges this. In verse 13, he says this: "But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed." And he then goes on to tell a parable, but it's all about him really, really challenging how hospitality is being done. And the second thing that happens is that from that, with his kind of countercultural teaching on hospitality, he then goes on to show us what he's expecting of his disciples and to do with sacrificial living. In verse 33, there's this challenging statement: "In the same way, those of you who do not give up everything, you cannot be my disciples." Really, really quite strong, challenging stuff for us as followers of Jesus. And then the third thing, in chapters 15, we have these three parables that are about things, people that are lost, and how people are searching for them and desperate to find them, and then have just this real sense of joy and rejoicing when they do find them. And I think this carries on with this sort of link to radical friendship, also something of the heart of God for the lost. So as we dig a bit deeper in these three kind of areas, so the first thing, this idea of hospitality, I think what we have to understand at the start of chapter 14, where this is that actually hospitality in the context Jesus was talking to, it wasn't just about friendship. It was about status and position and power. And what Jesus tells them to do, it really just turns all these social norms on their heads. And he's telling us that we need to be inviting the poor, those of low social status for whatever reason, and really people that aren't going to invite us back necessarily. That we're not going to get anything out of it. It's not going to improve our own social status by inviting them. But we are called to invite them because throughout Luke we're told that the good news is for the poor, those of low social status. And for that reason we need to be inviting these people. And we need to just be showing some of God's kingdom, the upside down kingdom, that just gives that hope and good news to the people that it was for the poor, as we hear again and again in Luke. Secondly, as we move on to the passage that is about the cost of being a disciple from verse 25, I think if Jesus is asking his disciples and opponents to live in this countercultural kind of way of radical friendship with people, that there's a cost to that. That isn't going to be simple and easy. That is going to require giving things up. They were probably going to lose their own social status through living in that inclusive way, and also probably face opposition. This wasn't going to be a simple, easy way to live in the context they were in. And I think in this passage that seems quite heavy and challenging, I think he's just spelling that out, that actually if you genuinely want to follow the things that I'm teaching, it is going to cost you, and you need to have that kingdom mindset and just be focused on the things of the kingdom. But it is going to require probably giving some of the normal things up that people expect and the normal things to do with the culture of that day. So it's a sacrifice to be a disciple, and to live in this welcoming way that Jesus talks about. And then the third thing as we come to chapter 15, to these parables, I think when we read these parables, so it's the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, I think when we read them, we can often on their own read them and see ourselves as maybe the lost son or the lost sheep that Jesus comes and finds and brings us home. But actually, when we look at it in this context, coming after these passages that have gone before, and also when you read the start of chapter 15, it does tell us that Jesus tells these things as a direct response to people commenting, muttering about how he welcomes sinners and tax collectors. So these parables are a response to that. So really, I think the people listening that were muttering those things, when we look at the parable of the lost son, I think the people that maybe he's trying to get them to really identify with is this older brother that is responsible, obedient, does all the right things in theory, but when it comes to it, he didn't understand the forgiveness, the redemption, the welcome that his younger brother was receiving. And actually, he didn't want to be involved. He didn't want to be a part of it. He didn't have joy in his heart for his brother returning. He actually found that quite painful, and he just didn't understand this thing, the things that were happening around him. And I think for Jesus, when he tells this story, really there's that opportunity for the Pharisees, for the people hearing this, to identify with that older brother. And there's that invitation, isn't there, that you can either come and join the celebration and celebrate that his younger brothers and become a part of that family, part of that kingdom, part of that celebration, or he can decide to distance himself. And even though he's been obedient and done all the right things, he might decide that actually, I don't want to be part of this celebration, this welcome, and I take myself away from this. And that's kind of the option that's given, I think, in these parables, that actually Jesus is the person searching, and that we want to be somebody that celebrates, that it's part of that celebration, that Jesus is, that Jesus loves. When he finds that lost person, we see something of the heart of God, but also something that's maybe expected of us as disciples to search for the lost as Jesus does. So 3 things that we can take from these passages for our kind of where we are right now. I think the first thing is about who do we share our meals with? Who do we invite? Obviously, right now, in the current kind of crisis and social distancing, we're not really inviting anyone outside of our kind of family or the people that live with us to meals at the moment. But we can still offer that radical friendship in our friends and neighbours, the people we are calling, the people we are messaging, the people we are connecting with and offering help to. Are those people that we do that for, are they people like us? Are they people that we know will care for us back? Maybe there's a challenge here for us to just ensure, are we reaching out to those people that are vulnerable and maybe isolated, that there's not going to be anything back for us, and maybe people that are quite different to us, that have been on a different journey, that actually we're reaching out to those that are different from us, those that really needs that welcome, those who we read this gospel and that good news is for them, and that actually there might not be anybody else that's offering that good news and that welcome and that offer of help to. So make sure we're reaching out to them. The second is that actually in this way of life, of living inclusively and welcoming, there's a cost to it. And I think for us it's probably not power and status, but it's time and convenience, that to live like this, it is going to cost us in kind of the time it will take, and the way that we might have to give other things up. So that there's a question there for how much are we sacrificing by following Jesus? Are we living out this hospitality that he's talking about? And can we see the cost of that? Because if we can't see any cost, are we really doing it? So that's a bit of a challenge for us. And then finally, I think the challenge is to join in the search and the rescue that Jesus has on his heart, that God has on his heart, to reach out to the lost. And in this current crisis, that looks quite different. So maybe that's something you can pray into, like, how do I be on the lookout for the lost and reach them during this time? And do I really have that joy and that celebration in my heart? You know, if I think of that older son, am I the one that hears of somebody that's been on a completely different journey and has such joy at them kind of returning or coming to Jesus for the first time? Can we just be a people of joy and celebration in the kingdom, and pray that God would just give us that same heart that he has for the lost, and that we all just join in with that party, that feast, that celebration when people come into the kingdom.